All right. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashem Yahweh Shah, Bashem Kakwadash. Second, I want to give honor to the apostles of GMS that voted well. Peace, blessing, salutation to the hopeful elect, to you Israelites, to the Hebrew Israelites, the 12 tribes, and to the Hebrew Israelite foreigners. And God damn, Shalaki. So this is Shakar Corral from GMS Virginia. As the title states, Looney Coons. I'm going to read a segment of the history of how the Israelites were treated in ancient Egypt. We know today this is known as spiritual Egypt, which dead bodies shall lay. 2/3 of our people are in a dead state, stupid, wicked, um, demented, and need pretty much to be put down. A lot of scriptures coming to me right now, but let me start off with Romans 1. I'm gonna go ahead and get it in this one. This is going to be in a GNT. Now I'm going to read a timeline. I'm going to ask ChatGPT about a timeline of how blacks were treated in the 1600s, the 1700s, and the 1800s, and the 1900s. So Romans 1, verse 25. That's why, it's really an honor, and it's not wise to be ungrateful, because really we have the most precious thing that we could ever have. Is His truth and His faith, and the restoration of our minds. Let me see. So the 2/3. So it says Romans 1:21. Salaki. They know Yahweh Bashem Shah, but they do not give Him the honor that belongs to Him. Matter of fact, yeah. Nor do they thank Him. Instead, their thoughts have become complete nonsense, and their empty minds are filled with darkness. They say they are wise, but they are fools. Instead of worshiping the immortal power, they worship images made to look like mortals, or birds, or animals, or reptiles. We're understanding that our people are a very covetous, ass-kissing, rebellious, stubborn people. And it's easy to deceive Jake. You give them a little bit of gifts. They kick their ass a little bit, and then, generations and decades, they will become fearful, and they will become serving. One thing our people have a problem is they can't let go of the so-called white man's gods, or this system. And since our people pretty much don't want to return and want to rebel against the truth, well, this is what's going to be the outcome of our people. So in these times that we're living in, is shouldn't be a surprise to you that our people just start getting worse and worse and worse. So verse 24, and so Yahweh Bashem Yahushua has given those people over to do the filthy things their hearts desire, and they do shameful things with each other. They exchange the truth about Yahweh Bashem Yahushua for a lie, and this is what the system did, going into the wine of philosophy. This is Revelation 13 and 17. They worship and serve what the Most High has created instead of the Creator Himself, who is to be praised forever. Aman. And what Esau did was pretty much use the creation that Yahweh Shah created and made it seem like he did it. He created all these things, pseudoscience and etc. So because they do this, Yahweh has given them over to a shameful passions. Even the women pervert the natural use of their sex by unnatural acts. Women are turned out. In the same way, the men give up natural sexual relations with women and burn with passion for each other, homosexuality. Men do shameful things with each other, and as a result, they bring upon themselves the punishment they deserve for their wrongdoing. So basically, there's nothing you can pretty much, try to make good out of this, as Esau has done. Esau pretty much has made the fact that Moism, nastiness, perversion, sexual immorality is a great thing, and it's something that you should try to discover. But it says right here, plain and simple, it is a wrongdoing. One thing that has helped our people to become this in this state of destruction is Christianity. 28, because those people refuse to keep in mind the true knowledge about Yahweh Shah, he has given them over to corrupted minds, so that they do the things that they should not do. They are filled with all kinds of wickedness, evil, greed, and vice. They are full of jealousy, murder, fighting, deceit, and malice. And this is why, in the state that Jake is in, this is all what's going on amongst so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, and Native Americans. It says they gossip and speak evil of one another. They are hateful to Yahweh Shah, insolent, proud, and boastful. They think of more ways to do evil. They disobey their parents. They have no conscience. You see that? Because that's pretty much plain and simple. You can tell these niggas is no conscience in our people. They're through. They're done. And this is what the system have done to our people. Well, one thing for certain, um, this has happened because our people they don't what they don't read, and they don't know history, and they don't even care to even read or learn about it or know it. They do not keep their promises, and they show no kindness or pity for others. They know that Yahweh Shah's law says that people who live in this way deserve death. Because again, the reason why Jake is deleting each other broad daylight, because what, they have no pity for each other. Again, the so-called white man, they forgive, but there's no forgiving amongst themselves. Wow, because ultimately the system has created a mindset that you hate yourself. Yet not only do they continue to do these very things, but they even approve of others who do them. So they love this shit because the programming of Jake's minds. So Israelites' treatment in Egypt, because I'm bringing this out just to bring this point out. So I asked ChatGPT, how were the Israelites treated in Egypt during the time of Moses? Um, our people not wanting to know our history, so Jake has become Looney Coons. During the time of Moses, the Israelites were treated very harshly in Egypt. According to the biblical account in the book of Exodus, their treatment changed dramatically over time, especially after the death of Joseph. And if you don't know who that is, that's the progenitor of Ephraim and Manasseh, our forefather, a Hebrew who had risen to power in Egypt generations earlier. He's a summary of how they were treated. So again, this is known today, is America is known as spiritual Egypt, modern day Egypt. That's why Scripture talks about Deuteronomy 28 and 68. You shall go back into Egypt, and no man shall buy you. No man shall redeem you or save you. The only one that's been able to do so is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. So oppression and slavery. A new Pharaoh came to power in Egypt who did not know Joseph. Exodus 1 and 8. He feared the growing population of Israelites and saw them as a threat to national security. That's kind of sounds like today. In response, the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites, forcing them into hard labor, building cities like Pithom and Ramesses. And it's funny, I think I looked up images on Pithom and Ramesses, and they built great pyramids. Um, and this is not a coincidence. Even here in America, Um, Going back to ancient Egypt with the pyramids, you had them here. Especially you can go to Las Vegas. You got a place called Memphis, Tennessee, etc. The work was described as bitter, involving brick making. America is also is known as bitter. Field labor and general construction under cruel masters. Who created this country? Who labored? Who, blood, sweat, and tears. Now, who's the new, pretty much niggas that's doing the hard labor? So-called Hispanics and Latinos. So, infanticide has got to be a new fucking word. Infanticide and population control. And again, this is all things that Esau does to this very day. As the Israelite population continued to grow, Pharaoh ordered a form of ethnic cleansing, even during the time of when the Lord was birthed, during the time of Herod. First, he told Hebrew midwives to kill all newborn Hebrew boys at birth. It's not a coincidence. The so-called black men were treated and are treated, and the so-called black boys are treated here in America. When they refused, he commanded that every male Hebrew baby be thrown into the Nile River. You can look this up in Exodus 1:22. This is the context in which Moses was born. His mother hid him for 3 months and eventually placed him in a basket in the Nile, where he was found and adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. So summary of conditions, they were forced labor, slavery, brutal treatment by Egyptian overseers, systematic oppression, infanticide of Hebrew boys. And that's why you gotta you know infanticide or genocide of Hebrew boys. That's why it's not a coincidence these so-called black boys and Latino, Hispanic boys, Native American boys are in the condition that they are today. Esau studies history. One thing, the problem of our people, they don't study not a damn thing. And they don't want to know not a damn thing because what Esau has done is pretty much made folly and stupidity and ignorancy and death and destruction cool. And this is why Jake, to take hold of it. One thing for certain, um, Lil Wayne made dreadlocks become cool. And I know for certain off top, Judah at one time, so-called black men in America, they did not like dreadlocks at all. You were either known as a nutcase or you were a Rastafarian. And I know this off top. So let me see something. Ask some more questions. How were let me put it like that? How were African Americans treated in the 1600s? Let me ask this question. I'm trying to make this very brief. All right, so in the 1600s, African American, primarily Africans brought to North America, were treated as property and subjected to brutal, dehumanizing conditions as slavery began to take root in the English colonies. Funny. Early arrival and transition to slavery. The first recorded Africans arrived in 1619 in Jamestown, Virginia, brought by English colonies. And I'm gonna be honest with you, when you go to Williamsburg, Virginia, and go around this area, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a weary feeling there when you go to Williamsburg. And also when you go to Charlottesville by Monticello, where damn, what's that fucking president? I think Thomas Jefferson. Initially, some Africans were treated similarly to indentured servants, meaning they could potentially gain their freedom. That was the hope that they gave you after a set number of years. However, this was rare and short lived. So, shift to racial slavery. Let's see. By the mid late 1600s, colonies increasingly passed laws that made African servitude hereditary and permanent. Africans, and I'm saying this, I'm speaking of you so-called blacks in America, which are the tribe of Judah. Africans and their descendants were legally defined as chattel, movable property, who could be bought, sold, and inherited. Ain't that a bitch? A stark, a stark legal and social distinction was made between white indentured servants who could eventually be free, as black slaves who could not. Um, Laws codifying racial slavery. Slave codes began to appear in colonies like Virginia and Maryland in the 1660s and 1680s, explicitly tying slavery to race. Examples: in 1662, Virginia passed a law saying that a child's status, free or enslaved, followed the mother's status. This ensured slavery could continue across generations. In 1667, Virginia ruled that conversion to Christianity. Damn, man, yo, this. Oh man, hey, for you Christians right here, here and in the background, the Looney Coons. Virginia ruled that conversion to Christianity did not change an enslaved person's status. Damn. Countering early ideas that religious conversion might lead to freedom. Yeah, I didn't know this was gonna say that. That's heavy. Damn. Fucking Virginia. I'm gonna tell, and like I tell everybody, Virginia is a weird fucking place, man. Very, very racist. Very one of the most racist states I've been. I've been a lot of places. Virginia's a fucking very racist, and it's still segregated. You can still feel all the eerie. That's what I wanted. The word was eerie. Eerie. It's a very eerie feeling here. These Edomites, they're different. It says, 4, harsh conditions. Enslaved Africans were forced to work on plantations, especially tobacco in the South, under extreme physical labor with little to no rights. They were subjected to violence, sexual exploitation, and family separations. Any form of resistance was brutally suppressed. Damn. 5, cultural survival and resistance. Despite harsh treatment, African people retained aspects of their cultures, languages, and spiritual practices. Why? Because we were Hebrew Israelites. Laying the foundations for African American identity, some resisted through running away, sabotaging tools of work, preserving so-called African tradition and storytelling, our history. And one thing for certain, through Yahweh Shah, he has allowed the rebirth and the knowing across the 4 corners that we are the Hebrew Israelites. And that was only by Yahweh Shah and Yahweh. In summary, in the 1600s, African Americans were mostly enslaved, with their status worsening over the century as racial slavery became fully institutionalized. They were treated as property, stripped of rights, and subjected to systemic brutality, laying the foundation for centuries of racial oppression in the U.S. Right. So I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna keep asking, how were Black Americans treated in the 1700s? This is for the Looney Coons. Yeah, basically the same thing. In the 1700s, most Black Americans were enslaved and treated as property, not as people with rights or autonomy. Their treatment was shaped by a brutal system of chattel slavery, especially in the American colonies and later the early United States. Here's an overview of how Black Americans were treated during that century, and we still treated this way. Nothing has changed. It's actually worse. 1, enslavement and forced labor. Majority enslaved by the 1700s. The vast majority of Black people in America were enslaved Africans or their descendants. Forced labor. Enslaved people were forced to work in agriculture, especially tobacco, rice, indigo, and later cotton, construction, domestic service, and skilled trades without pay. Lifelong condition slavery was permanent, hereditary, and legally enforced. Children born to enslaved women automatically became slaves themselves. And they want to talk about they give a fuck about children, right? Two, legal status and rights. No legal rights. Enslaved people had no legal personhood. They could not own property. Mm, let me hit that's for the back too. Testify against white people in court or legally marry. Slave code. Colonies passed harsh laws, slave codes to control enslaved people, restricting movement, education, assembly, and access to weapons. Punishment. Enslaved individuals were subject to violent punishment, including whipping, branding, mutilation, and execution for resisting or breaking rules. Mm. This is why also they give you a reason. This is why they demonize you as well. That Esau. Once when you're talking about blacks, everything is okay. Anything goes. Anything flies. They're thugs, criminals, ghetto, everything bad, and nobody will. It won't be no pause. They won't stop. No, you get to say it all through. But when you talk about the so-called white man, oh no, 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 you gotta shut your mouth. No, 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 no. You gotta stop that. I wonder why. But again, but our people want to save this devil, right? So it said daily life and conditions. 3, harsh condition, long hours, poor housing, inadequate food, and no medical care were common. Family separation. Enslaved families could be broken up and sold at any time. Resistance. Despite the danger, enslaved people resisted through work slowdowns, escape, sabotage, and cultural preservation. Racism, and dehumanization. Racial ideology. White colonists created and spread racist ideologies to justify slavery, claiming Africans were inferior, uncivilized, or naturally suited to servitude. Black fatigue. That's why I'm all, through the spirit of Yahweh and Rashad, you know, through the spirit, brothers been going into this, how Esau is justifying of what they're about to do to our people. And this is needed because, again, going back to the 2/3, since you love the so-called white man and you love his ways and love his system, you have become an object of people that Esau can say. I'm going to read this again. Racism and dehumanization. This system has dehumanized our people. So white colonists created and spread racist ideologies to justify slavery, claiming Africans, we notice as Israelites, were inferior, uncivilized, or naturally suited for servitude. And this is what Esau is doing now in the works. So it says, dehumanization. Black people were often described in animalistic or subhuman terms to strip them of dignity and justify their treatment. There you have it. That's why it's not a coincidence. Every time they talk about black people, how do they talk about them? That's why our people need to stop with that black shit and tell, hey, so you need to start really telling the world, well, we get it. But again, that's why when we go out there in the houses and the byways, we let it be known we are the real Hebrew Israelites. And those Jewish people that call themselves the Jews and the Jewish people, they're frauds. 5, 5, free black people, right? Small free population. A minority of black people were free, especially in northern cities. Some had bought their freedom or been manumitted, freed by their enslavers. Still discriminated against. Free black people faced legal restrictions, economic hardship, and social exclusion. They were often required to carry papers proving their status. See that? See, this is the history our people don't even want to look at or face, or, they don't want to believe it. But this is how the so-called white man is. This is why this is why they're going crazy now, because, so-called white people were told that, blacks were inhumane and they were to entertain you, and we were to entertain them. But see, now that they're losing, the so-called the elites and Amalek is doing them dirty. You know, all the elites really got to do is narrate that hatred that Esau is feeling, that doubt, that withdrawal, that white so-called white guilt, and knowing that he's really a fucking loser. All Esau has to do is narrate that hatred and put it back on you so-called black people, and that's how he always did it. And it says, and basically say, oh, the reason why America's like this is because of black people, because of the thugs and the criminals, the Hispanics and the Latinos, the natives. So, so I'm gonna go to the 18. How were Black Americans treated in the 1800s? Black Americans in the 1800s were subjected to severe racial oppression, discrimination, and violence, though their experiences vary significantly depending on the time period and region, north versus south, pre versus post Civil War. Here's a broad overview of how they were treated throughout the century. Early 1800s, 1800 through 1860, slavery and oppression in the South. Most black Americans were enslaved. They were legally considered property, not people. Forced to work under brutal conditions on plantations, families were often separated through sales, subject to physical punishment, rape, and denial of education. Slave codes restricted every aspect of their lives, forbidding literacy, movement, and assembly. Even to this day, man. In the North, slavery was legally abolished, but black Americans still face racism and discrimination. Ultimately, you could be called a criminal, and they can justify you shifting you or putting you in jail. Many worked in low-paying jobs and lived in segregated communities. They were often denied the right to vote, access to quality education, or entry into certain professions. Um, Civil War era, 1861, 1865, turning point. Black Americans played a major role. Over 180,000 black men served in the Union Army. It's a lot of fucking force. After the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863 declared enslaved people in Confederate states free. 13th Amendment, 1865, formally abolished slavery in the U.S. And we all understand this was the time when so-called blacks were really fighting for freedom, and allowed a lot of these Edomites to gain their independence from um, the UN, NATO. So let me see. And then after they pretty much had to force, because again, you had a people that was oppressed, and Esau was giving them hope, giving them freedom, promising them, but hey, when they came back, you got fucked over. And a lot of Jakes did get monies, a little bit of monies, and get a little bit of status. But again, these little white so-called Edomites, so-called whites that lived in these towns, they didn't like that. They didn't like that shit, man. They didn't like the fact that blacks could walk with his head up. So Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, brief hope, backlash follows. See that? Some progress. 14th Amendment granted citizenship. 15th Amendment, key word. Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, brief hope, backlash follows. The 15th Amendment granted black men the right to vote. Black Americans held political office and started businesses and schools, but also violent backlash. Rise of the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups. See that? Black codes were passed in southern states to restrict freedom. Widespread violence, including lynchings, voter intimidation, and race riots. Man, oh man. Post Reconstruction Jim Crow era begins 1877 1900. Regression. Federal troops withdrew from the South in 1877. Southern states reasserted white control. Jim Crow laws enforced strict racial segregation in schools, transportation, and public spaces. Black Americans were systematically disenfranchised through poll taxes, literary tests, and grandfather clauses. Economic exploitation continued through sharecropping, trapping many in poverty. Racial violence and lynching became common with little legal protection. So, hey, let's go on to the 1900s. How were blacks, black Americans treated in the 1900s? Since it was so long ago, the white, Esau, Massa, that wasn't me. That was a long time ago. So the treatment of black Americans in the 1900s varied by decade, but overall, the century was marked by systemic racism. Oh man. Legal discrimination, violence, and social exclusion, especially in the first half. Man, oh man. But it was so long ago, right? And this is the leader. However, it was also a period of powerful resistance, cultural achievement, and then the eventual progress of the civil rights movement, right? But that was also manuscripted by the so-called white man. That was that gift, and that was our last stronghold. Because after that civil rights movement, Jake really believed that we won. But how the fuck do you erase all the history that happened? And haven't even started yet. But how do you erase all 1900s all the way down, and then you start at 1960s, and then you think we fucking did something? Come on, man, get the fuck out of here. So early 1900s, this is 1900 through 1930s. Social and legal oppression. Jim Crow laws in the South enforced racial segregation in all public spaces. Black Americans were denied the right to vote through poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation. Separate but equal. Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896, upheld legal segregation through facilities for black people were almost always inferior. See that? Violence and terror. Widespread lynchings and mob violence terrorized black communities. The NAACP documented hundreds of lynchings in these decades. Race massacres like the Tulsa Race Massacre 1921 and East St. Louis riots 1917 destroyed prosperous black communities and resulted in many deaths. Economic and education inequality. Black Americans were often limited to the lowest paying, most dangerous jobs. Schools for black children were underfunded and overcrowded. In the North, racism still limited access to housing, jobs, and education, though not through official laws. Mid 1900s, 1940s to 1960s. Segregation and resistance. Despite serving in World War II, black veterans returned to second class citizenship. Really, they're lying about that. You really was fifth class, because that's when Esau started bringing in all those immigrants. And then it moved, everything you were so called fighting for, trying to obtain, they gave it to them. The civil rights movement gained momentum. Brown v. Board of Education, 1954 ruled school segregation unconstitutional. Montgomery bus boycott, 1955 and 56, and sit-ins protested segregation. And this was all this was really when Esau really started using this witchcraft. And this is all what that was. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., he was a PSYOP, Malcolm X PSYOP, CIA agents, and an organization like SNCC, NAACP, all PSYOPs and agents in core fought for justice. Major achievements: Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination. Voting Rights Act of 1965 banned discriminatory voting practices like literacy tests. Fair Housing Act of 1968 aimed to end racial discrimination in housing. So, damn. late 1900s, 1970s, and 1990s. Progress with limits. Affirmative action policies were introduced to address historic inequalities. A growing black middle class emerged, and black culture flourished in music, film, and literature. However, de facto segregation persisted in schools and neighborhoods. A growing black middle class emerged. So, in the black culture, they gave you as black exploitation. The music they started to give you was degenerate, and in the film and the literature was all lies and their history. New challenges, mass incarceration began to rise, and I wonder why. So they gave you this sense of you got something, but then they turned it right around and criminalized you because you got to go back to them laws. You were free until you were called a criminal or caught a charge, and they can pretty much imprison you and make you a slave. So new challenges, mass incarceration began to rise, disproportionately affecting Black Americans. And another thing too, Lord's well, I'm gonna get into Northern Kingdom as well, but that's gonna be another video. And one thing I always consider and wonder, why the fuck you so-called Northern Kingdom, you so-called Hispanic Latinos, why y'all not doing bringing out a lot of the history that y'all had to go through? Fuck. New challenges. Mass incarceration began to rise, disproportionately affecting Black Americans. The war on drugs in the 1980s and 1990s led to harsh sentencing laws and increase in policing in Black communities. Police brutality and economic inequality remain central issues. I'm gonna do one better. Let me see something. I want to see something real quick. All right, so I did a little extra. How were Black Americans treated in 2000? So again, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Um, I'm gonna read Civil Rights and Social Progress. Let me see, because the representation that Esau ended up shaping for us was to shape us to really believe in we were Americans and we had something. This we made progress. We won. Everything's okay. We did it. We in the promised land, and so they pretty much again going to Revelation 17 and 13 that wine those philosophies, but this was all pretty much enacted and done to lead all things to the New World Order, leading to the MOTB. Civil rights and social progress, political representation. There was growing political engagement and representation, notably Barack Obama, which was all, bullshit. Again, they try to give you niggas some type of hope. He was elected U.S. Senate 2004. His presidential campaign began in 2007. With election 2008 was a historic moment, but that wasn't. He was a Hamite. Cultural influence. Black Americans continued to shape American culture on how the way they looked at you as black and African and all that bullshit. Colored people. Pretty much, they made you feel low, and that Esau made it that you had to prove yourselves and love me, love me. I'm the here. Look at me and look at me. That's why the scripture said, "Why trimmest thou ways to seek His love?" That's pretty much what you so-called blacks and we still do to this day. You just trim your way for the so-called white man to love you. Thus, the elder from South Carolina did that video about those Jakes crying and the fucking West Indian woman and Jake just fucking Christians, man. So it says, especially in music, film, sports, and fashion. Why? Because you were just an entertainer. That's all you are. You're just an entertainer. And once you go beyond that, that's when you are a problem. You are a nigga. You are a thug. You're a criminal. Racism and discrimination. And this is in the 2000s. Systemic racism. Despite civil rights advances, systemic racism persisted in housing, employment, and education. Racial profiling. Black Americans, especially men. Ancient Egypt were disproportionately targeted by police for stops, searches, and arrests. The issue of racial profiling remained a major concern. Hurricane Katrina 2005, the disaster exposed deep racial and economic inequality. The slow and inadequate government response to the suffering of black residents in New Orleans drew national and international criticism. And during that time, Fidel Castro offered to help the so-called blacks, but your good old America, they didn't allow it. Criminal justice and policing. Mass incarceration, black Americans were still disproportionately incarcerated. This was a continuation of trends from the 1980s and 90s, especially related to drug laws. Now, how did drugs get in your community? I wonder. Police brutality, incidents of police violence against black Americans occurred throughout the decade, although it wasn't until the 2010s that movements like the BLM brought major national attention to the issue. But you got to ask yourself this: if everything was okay, we was all human beings, and we were all one people in Christian love, love, and all that feeling bullshit Christianity. Why is this? You had to have a so-called Black Lives Matter to bring awareness to what's going on. Come on, fuck out of here. So economic and educational inequality, and this is all 2000s. So nothing changed from the 1600s. Wealth gap. The racial wealth gap persisted, and you niggas is still asking for help. You niggas is still waiting for the so-called white man to be fair. Come on. The racial wealth gap persisted in 2007 through 8. The financial crisis hit black households particularly hard, leading to massive home foreclosures and job losses. School segregation. De facto segregation in public schools increased in many areas, and schools in black neighborhoods often have few resources and low performance outcomes. Health disparity. Black Americans, and this also you can go to the curses of Deuteronomy 28. Health disparity. Black Americans had higher rates of chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension and lower access to quality health care. The HIV/AIDS epidemic disproportionately affected black communities in the 2000s. So, yeah, man. And that's pretty. That's all I'm gonna do. I'm trying to see if I got anything off top that I want to bring forth. I was gonna read some more about Wisdom of Solomon, about gods and idols, but I pretty much made my point. Nothing has changed. And this is why ultimately, if you don't repent, and you don't come back to Yahweh Shah, change yourself, and wake up to the fact that you are the Hebrew Israelite. Matter of fact, I'm going to get this in the land of their captivity. And if you don't admit, and you can't see that you're a captive, you're a slave, you're a prisoner of war, then you need to be put down, because you are a fucking you have been dehumanized. You are an idiot. You are an animal. In the land of their captivity, they shall call your name. Let me see what it says. I think it's in Chronicle somewhere. Book 2 came out. Let me see. So it said, the phrase in the land of the captivity shall call your name comes from the book of Baruch 2:32 in the Old Testament, which states the Apocrypha, and they shall praise me in the land of their captivity. And think upon my name. This verse is part of a promise from Yahweh Bashim Shah that the exiled people of Israel will eventually repent and return to him, remembering his name and praise him even while in exile. Um, yeah, so Baruch 2 and 3:30. For I knew that they would not hear me. Yeah, because again, Jake is stubborn and they're rebellious. Esau put the hurt in them, put the works on them, and then they gave him a promise and a hope. And it's like Jake is still, they, they're just stiff necked. So it says, but in the land of their captivities, they shall remember themselves. Because, Jake wondered, like, come on, man, why, out of all people, why are we going through, why. And I know, this is mind boggling for Jake because even when I was a little ass kid, I used to ask, I used to have a lot of questions, man. So it says, and shall know that I am the Lord their power, if I will give them an heart and ears to hear, and they shall praise me in the land of their captivity, and think upon my name and return from their stiff neck and from their wicked deeds, serving idols and serving their oppressors, kissing the so-called white man's ass. For they shall remember the way of their fathers, which sinned before the Lord. I was trying to find one in Chronicles as well. Matter of fact, let me hold on. 34, and I will bring them again to the land which I promised with an oath unto their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The fuck is this? Come on, this fucking pop-ups, man. And they shall be lords of it, and I will increase them, and they shall not be diminished. That's a contradiction on who them fucking Jewish people. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them to be their power, and they shall be my people. And I will no more drive my people of Israel out of the land that I have given them. So that's let you know right there. The people of the land in Israel right now is not their land. Because did not Netanyahu just make an outcry? Oh, we need assistance from America because the Palestinians. Well, hey, because you're not the fucking people. But other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this thing up. This has been pretty much the biggest secret that's been hidden from the world because for the so-called white man to stay in power, he has to pretty much eradicate the truth and lie and bring forth the deceit, that witchcraft and sorcery, so he can undermine the people of the fact that we are the real Hebrew Israelites, and the Lord is going to restore us in this so-called white man infrastructure. America, Babylon the Great, and the people that's in the land of Israel right now, the Jewish people, they're going to be fucking removed out of there, and then they're going to eventually go into slavery. Yeah, you got a harsh thing coming for you, you so-called white man. You fucking Edomites, man. Yeah, you got a lot of punishment. And the scripture says, reward her double. You're going to drink that cup. Because if we had to go through this, us so-called Negro, Latino, Hispanic, Native American, West Indians, if we had to suffer like the way we did, all I'm going to say is it before I end it. I'm glad I'm not Edomite. With that, I'm going to say shalom.